he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. Going downstairs to start this video off because I have a little guest joining me in the house this morning. I'll be able to see it. But yes, that's a little echidna. I don't know how he's in my house. Yeah, he's been in here since this morning, so yeah, I've already rang wires. Hopefully we can get somebody to pick them up. But they've been in here for the last couple of hours, and I rang them probably about an hour ago. But yeah, just hanging around. He was hanging around over here behind all these wires and stuff near the computer, stuff like that. So it was in a more dangerous position in there. But yeah, a little guest. For this episode of How's My Team. Didn't expect an echidna in the house. Obviously I've seen echidnas before, but not in somebody's house. I've seen like skinks and like lizards and stuff like that, but not an echidna in the house. What are you doing? What are you doing? No, it's probably just looking for food. But yeah. So all you can see is those spikes, which is another reason why I don't want to touch it. So hopefully when the wise person comes, they can pick him up, because obviously the backyard, the neighbours have got, I know at least this one over the fence just here has got dogs, so I don't know how they'll react to an echidna. I'm not sure about the other one, but I'd say they probably do too. There's a few dogs around this block, and obviously since I'm living in units, obviously I've got a lot of car traffic coming out the front as well. So don't know what to do with that, so obviously called wires just to make sure that they rescue it and do what they need to do to relocate him from being inside a house. Because obviously we don't have any ants really. Really it only comes in from the laundry when they come under the laundry door, if anything. But we haven't had any infestations of ants inside. But with all that said, I know it was a big tangent there, but obviously we're going to talk about the Giants women playing in Western Australia, playing against West Coast. We've also got to talk about plenty of other games as well. Obviously talking about the NRL prelim finals, the NRLW prelim finals. We're going to talk about Liverpool as well, because they've obviously played in the Premier League as well against Crystal Palace away from home. I think it's actually one of their first games away from home this season. And then a few other miscellaneous stuff like the Seattle Seahawks. We'll talk about the Cubs a little bit. But yeah, as you can see, my face is still cut up a little bit as well. Still feeling a bit ill. Obviously coughing a decent amount now. But thankfully my runny nose has gone away, which is good. But yeah, as you can see, it's still got blood cut. It's solidified on my nose that I need to get rid of pretty soon. But I was waiting until after my runny nose was gone to do that, because yeah, I've done it at least twice already. But yeah, quite a few games to talk about, quite a few things to talk about, and yeah, just obviously trying to record this around having a situation of having an echidna downstairs in the house, which I don't know how the hell he come in, but yeah, come in. So the first thing we got to talk about is obviously Liverpool. Actually, Liverpool's game was actually the first game of the weekend of a lot of the sport, including for my teams as well. And they went to Crystal Palace. They went to London. One of their first away games of the season. I don't think it is their first one. I think it might be their second one. But they went to London to play Crystal Palace, and once again, Crystal Palace have somehow found a way to win against Liverpool. So that's the second game, actually, yeah, the second game in a row for Crystal Palace to win against Liverpool. In fact, feel like it's like the second or third time, obviously, that they've won against Liverpool in the space of the last 12, 15 months or so. But obviously they scored in the 9th minute, so we were down 1-0 at half time. They ended up, Federico ended up scoring in the 87th minute for Liverpool, and then basically a reverse script for Liverpool, as obviously you've seen the last couple of weeks, Liverpool in very, very close games. They've won it very, very late in stoppage time. And in the 7th minute of stoppage time after full time, Crystal Palace ended up scoring the winning goal. So, yeah, so that is the first loss for the Liverpool men's team in the Premier League. So a lot of results ended up going their way a little bit, with obviously all the games finishing this week now. It was a 3-point lead. Obviously, Crystal Palace is one team that hasn't been beaten yet. It's just only because they've drew a lot of games. It was a 3-point lead. It is now down to a 2-point lead, with Arsenal being in second behind Liverpool, and then Crystal Palace in third, with the Tottenham Hotspurs in fourth. Sunderland move up to fifth, Bournemouth to sixth, Man City moves up a couple of positions to 7th. Chelsea in 8th, they drop down to 8th. Brighton in 9th on the same points, as well as Fulham and Leeds. It's only just because obviously the goal difference there. Chelsea being +3, Brighton with a flat 0, Fulham with -1, and Leeds with -3. And then it goes down to Everton. Brentford, obviously with their win against Manchester United, jumped from, I think they were in like 16th or 17th, right up to 13th on 7 points. Man United drop a spot to 14th, because obviously they lost, and actually they lost by 2 goals, so their goal difference actually might have hampered them there. Newcastle in 15th. Aston Villa move out of the relegation zone with a win to move up to 16th. Nottingham Forest dropped down a spot to 17th, so just outside of the relegation zone, but 1 point out of the relegation zone. And then inside the relegation zone, it's Burnley, West Ham, and Wolves, who have gotten off to a terrible start, but have gotten a point in a draw, who are still in last, but at least they're off the 0. So yes, so 2-1 win for Crystal Palace over Liverpool. Very, very interesting week, because obviously we've got the Champions League this week coming on the Wednesday at 5 a.m. my time in Istanbul, rather. Sorry, that's my sickness coming through. And then Sunday at 3:30 in the morning against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. So another big game. Obviously, Chelsea obviously still in the top 10, looking for a spot for European football. Still very early, obviously, in the season. But obviously Chelsea, with them playing European football at the same time as Liverpool is at the moment. All the games are going to be very, very big. So yes, big Champions League game coming up in Istanbul on Wednesday, and then obviously a game at Stamford Bridge on Sunday in London. So yeah, Bit of travel for Liverpool, but that's what you kind of expect when you're playing European football, especially Champions League football. And then we moved to the Giants women's team. So obviously they were on a 2-game winning streak, heading over to Western Australia to play the West Coast Eagles. And the West Coast Eagles did win over the Giants by 42 points. So a decent margin. The Eagles go into the top 8 once again. Big result for them. Excuse me. And obviously they kind of got blown away in the first quarter. It was 4-1 for the Eagles to 1 goal and 0 behinds for the Giants. Excuse me. My cough is pretty bad. And then both teams kind of fared about the same. In the second quarter, the Eagles scored 1 goal 3 compared to 1 goal 1 for the Giants at half. And then obviously the Eagles ended up scoring 3 goals 1 to 2 goals 2 in the third quarter, and then 3 goals 4 against 1 goal in the last. So pretty convincing win, obviously, for the West Coast Eagles over the Giants. Obviously breaks the streak of a couple of wins in a row for the Giants women's team. They still stay in 15th position in just on percentage. And Collingwood must have been lost by a lot because they dropped under the Giants. Because obviously they're on the same amount of wins, but their percentage is 63.3 compared to the Giants' 65.1. So they must have lost heavily. And then obviously the Western Bulldogs must have won pretty convincingly in their game as well, which I'm pretty sure that they did early on. I think it was on Friday, actually, that game in particular. Richmond is still on the bottom, and Gold Coast are still in second last. But in terms of the top 8, obviously Kangaroos are still on the top. Melbourne are in second, Hawthorn are in third, Adelaide in fourth, then Carlton, Sydney Swans and Brisbane are in 5th, 6th and 7th. So those teams really haven't actually moved. It's just the teams at the bottom of the 8 and outside of the 8 that have changed, because obviously the Eagles have jumped in with their big percentage win to jump into 8th. St Kilda in 9th, Geelong in 10th, and Essendon in 11th, with Fremantle in 12th. And the Western Bulldogs in 13th, with Port in 14th before the Giants. So, yeah, big game, obviously, for the Giants women's team coming up this weekend. It is against the Saints on Saturday. Very, very interesting game, because we'll see what happens, because the Saints have been relatively a side that has been up and down all over the place, a little bit even more than the men's team has been as of late, because the men's team have been relatively good, and obviously keep being in the bottom 10 from years gone by, but they haven't done it without effort, obviously, with the Saints team. And the girls team is about the same as well. They've relatively had some really, really good wins, and then had some good losses, and then had some really bad losses. Obviously, they did win over the weekend. They were down by a decent margin. I think even at three-quarter time, and ended up coming back against Port Adelaide in their game very late to win it. So going to be an interesting game in Sydney on Saturday. We'll see what happens with the Giants. Hopefully they can pick up a win, but who knows? They'll get out of the bottom 4 if other results can go their way as well, the Giants. So, but obviously it's going to start with a win. So we'll see what happens with them. But yeah, very interesting situation for the Giants. And surprisingly, that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team, in terms of actually me talking about my actual teams that I mainly talk about on this particular series. Because obviously the Giants men's team is finished, the Titans men's team and Titans women's teams, they're both done. And then obviously the Wanderers they're only playing pre-season friendlies at the moment. if that, because obviously they're out of the Australia Cup, which actually plays this, I think maybe next weekend, I think off the top of my head. I'd have to have a look at it properly, but I'm pretty sure that's right. But yeah, we don't have really anybody to talk about because obviously the A-League season has not started up again. But obviously we're going to talk about the AFL Grand Final, we're going to talk about the NRL prelims and a lot of miscellaneous stuff. We'll say Seattle getting a big win, 23-20 over the Cardinals in a division clash. So they played on Thursday night football, so technically Friday morning my time. And they got a big W, which is great. Great result for them. I think they moved to 3-1 with obviously other results going our way as well. I think we've actually moved up to second place in the division. We'll have to have a look. Give me two minutes. Not necessarily 2 minutes, but you know what I mean. Because, yeah, it's been a big result for them, obviously winning against... And ultimately, it was always going to be hard for a Cardinals team in terms of... let's go standings. Go division. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. So, yes, they're in second at the moment because obviously the 49ers did lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars today. But obviously... the 49ers beat the Seahawks in the first game of the season, so they have the tiebreaker at the moment. It won't matter until the second game of the season, and usually I don't know why, because ultimately you play 2 games in a division, one at home, one away for a particular team. So obviously San Francisco we played at home in the first round, and we'll play them in Santa Clara at Levi Stadium when we play them away. But for whatever reason, the later one, in terms of the season, if you win the later game of the 2 division games, it somehow is a bit more important than the first game that you play, because obviously, yes, I guess in a way, the 49ers and the Seahawks, it kind of matters just in the fact that it's like, oh, it's the first game of the season compared to maybe like the third last game of the season, when the teams could be completely different in terms of form. I don't know. But obviously the Niners, the Seahawks and the Rams are all tied at 3 wins apiece, with 1 loss, and then the Cardinals have got 2 wins and 2 losses, obviously losing against Seattle this week, but that's a big division game. Obviously, we'll have to check the schedule and see. Oh no, team schedule. Scroll down to Seattle and see what their schedule is next, if it loads for me. So their next game is against the Buccaneers at home. So the Bucks ended up losing today against Philadelphia in a close one. It was 6-point win for the Philadelphia Eagles, which I thought was going to be the case. I thought it was going to be a relatively close game, especially with the players that they had out, the Buccaneers. The fact that they got beaten by 6 points is actually relatively good for them, because they're definitely going to be a powerhouse again. So ultimately, yes, we're playing the Buccaneers at home before we go away to play the Jags in 2 weeks' time. On the 12th of October. So yeah, so it's going to be an interesting couple of results coming in the next couple of weeks. We'll see how we fare against the Buccaneers, because we've done relatively okay. Obviously, the big standout win, 44-13 last week against the Saints, and then 31-17 against the Steelers. But obviously, the loss that we've had is the close one, the 17-13 to the Niners in the first week. So it's going to be interesting to see how we shape up against a really top team in terms of where we're positioned, because we're doing relatively okay, Seattle, but we could be a lot better. Yeah, it's just one of those things where at least playing against the Buccaneers, we'll see where we are. in terms of like the hierarchy in terms of playoffs teams and whether we might actually do relatively well in playoffs, because obviously we haven't played like teams like Philadelphia yet. We haven't played teams like Tampa Bay yet. Obviously the Niners, obviously last year didn't make the playoffs, but have previously as well. But playing in your division, it's always going to be a tough gig, because any one of those games is going to be very tough. Always has been. Especially even like against the Cardinals, where they've had, relatively bad seasons. They always seem to play relatively okay against some of their division rivals, which obviously Seattle is one of them. So it's an interesting situation for them. We're going to talk about the prelims for the NRL and the NRLW. Obviously, the NRLW I can just skip over a decent amount, because obviously the very obvious result of the Roosters and the Broncos making to the grand final has come true. So they'll be playing each other in Sydney next week. Who could have saw that coming? Though I will say, at least with the Roosters game, it was close. It got down to a 1 point win and a field goal probably 5 minutes before the end of the season. It was an interesting situation, obviously, for the Sharks, because they ended up having somebody sent to this, or the Roosters had somebody sent to the sim in about 15 minutes before the end of the second half, and then the Sharks ended up scoring 2 tries pretty quickly. It's just one of those things so that they kind of put themselves back in the game, and then a couple of results kind of went against them. It's just one of those things that, obviously 2 loaded teams going up against each other in the grand final. To some, that might seem alright, and obviously we'll see how they go, because obviously the Roosters didn't play relatively well against the Sharks, so if they're switched on, who knows when it comes to playing against the Broncos. But it's just one of those things that kind of seems like, was always destined to happen. The NRL Grand Final, though, is an interesting situation, because the Broncos ended up beating the Panthers. So the dynasty, or at least the streak of 4 premierships in a row, stops at 4 for Penrith. They go 1 game short of defending their title at a grand final, and maybe adding an extra one to it. So it will end up being Melbourne and the Broncos in the grand final on the men's side of things. Feel like it's going to be Melbourne. Melbourne's the one. I feel like the Broncos, even in the game that they played against Penrith, they were a little bit ill-disciplined. And their first half was not great from what I hear. Obviously, I was working at the time that they played the game. They were behind. I think they were behind 14-0 and ended up winning 16-14. So not a great result for them, especially if Melbourne get to a pretty decent lead in the first half of the grand final. You've got to turn it around. And although the Broncos' second halves in the last few games have been relatively good, and obviously beating the Storm in the last round of the regular season, I think it kind of didn't matter for Melbourne at that point, because they had second no matter what. So they kind of lost to Brisbane in Brisbane with relative ease, obviously. Kind of got, obviously, the Broncos into the top 4 in the first place. But it's one of those things where I feel like it's Melbourne's year. Like they're too coordinated, and the Broncos are too ill-disciplined that they'll give away a lot of penalties. That I feel like it's going to be Melbourne again, more so than it is going to be the Brisbane Broncos. And yeah, it could be a situation where Brisbane just choke. But who knows at this point, because, but I feel like I'm more inclined, if I put money on someone, I'd put money on Melbourne to win over the Broncos, because I just don't feel like the Broncos are relatively different from the team that went there a couple of years ago against the Penrith Panthers. They got to that 20-point lead and took their foot off the gas. They choked in the biggest way possible, and they lost that game. Now, ultimately, I could say that for a lot of them, obviously a lot of those players played in that grand final that obviously are playing in this one, and I get that, and ultimately you could say, oh, it's a learning experience, but at the same time, you got to learn to have discipline, and if you don't against Melbourne, they're just going to batter you. They're going to score points. They're going to score a lot of points if you're lucky. And 16 points, yes, in the last couple of grand finals, might have got you the win. Obviously, the 2023 grand final, I think it was, against Brisbane, that wouldn't have got them over the line. And it almost didn't. It actually wouldn't have, because obviously the Broncos were up 20 points. So it wouldn't have got them the win there. It's not going to be enough points, I think, against Melbourne. 16 is nowhere near enough. And ultimately, against a defense like the Penrith Panthers, the Penrith defense, even though with some of the team being relatively rookies or inexperienced players in terms of finals games, their defense is still pretty good. I wouldn't say it's obviously the best compared to, say, like the Storm or like the Bulldogs previously. Obviously, during some of the regular season had been like the standout. Canberra is another one that comes to mind in terms of defense as well. But if if the Broncos' defense is not up to snuff, they're going to get blown out. So that's one of the things that they got to be careful with. But ultimately, if I put money on anybody, it'd be Melbourne over the Broncos to win next week. So in the first game, obviously, which is like the New South Wales and Queensland Cup teams playing against each other, obviously the Warriors ended up winning over the Dragons in the New South Wales Cup, so they've won the New South Wales Cup. And then I think, who was it yesterday? I'm just trying to find it because I had a picture of it. Where are we? I know it's in here somewhere. I'm going to have to find it. Because I did have the result from the Queensland Cup as well. There it is. Burleigh Bears ended up winning over the North Devils 22-8 in their game. So it'll be the Burleigh Bears playing against the Warriors in, I forget what the competition's called, but it's cross state state championship or something like that. I forget what the actual cup is called, but the New South Wales Cup winner and the Queensland Cup winner play against each other on grand final day, just like a battle of supremacy of Queensland versus New South Wales, kind of like a state of origin type of thing. And they've done it for quite a few years, and ultimately some of the New South Wales teams have won, some of the Queensland teams have won. So it'll be very interesting to see, because obviously the Warriors are in the New South Wales Cup, obviously New Zealand. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare against Burleigh, because Burleigh's been pretty decent this year, but we'll see what happens. And I'm just going to be, just a second, I just need to blow my nose. I can feel it kind of dripping, so I'll do that and then just do the rest of this outro. Alright, that feels a little bit better. But yeah, so ultimately, so the Warriors got up, obviously Burleigh got up, Melbourne Storm have gotten up, the Broncos on both the men's and women's side have gotten up, the Roosters on the women's side has gone up as well. We had the AFL Grand Final on the weekend on Saturday as well, and yeah, it was a very interesting game. Obviously, I took the day off because I was going to spend it with my dad. Obviously, still feeling sick at that point, but it was relatively was okay actually. Probably about halfway through the day, and there was the Brisbane Lions that ended up going back to back in a 47-point win, I think it was, at the end of things, which was crazy to me because yeah, it was one of those things that was going to be always, 122 to 75. But at halftime, it was all tied up at 36 points apiece. So yes, the Brisbane Lions ended up exploding with like 80 points in the second half compared to Geelong. And the Geelong, I kind of feel like they kind of obviously forced some mistakes, and it was ended up going to be well over 50 points with a few late goals to Geelong at the last 7 minutes or so of the game. But yeah, the Geelong defense just couldn't keep up with the Lions offense. It was crazy seeing Brisbane playing the way that they were playing in the second half of that AFL Grand Final. But Brisbane just wanted it more. It was one of those things where they just wanted it a lot more than Geelong did. So we'll see if it takes Geelong 2 years to get back to the Grand Final and then obviously win it, because that's what they did last time. They lost one. So they lost one in 2020 in the COVID year, obviously, of the season. Shortened season, shortened quarters as well. And Richmond, obviously, was the last team. And it's funny because, obviously, Geelong lost in a game. And I just realising it now, that the last two grand finals that they've actually lost is against teams that have actually gone back-to-back. Because, obviously, the COVID year, yes, obviously, Richmond did win against Geelong, but they also won in 2019 over my Giants in 2019. So, yeah, very interesting stat. It's the second time that Brisbane this century have gone back-to-back, at least, if not more, obviously, because they did it in 2001, 2002, and 2003. They went three-peat at the start of the century. And they actually did go to the grand final a fourth time in a row. Obviously, they went back in 2004, who obviously got beaten by Port Adelaide for Port Adelaide's first flag of the competition, the AFL in general, as a club. And in fact, actually, I feel like it's their only flag so far since they've been added into the competition. But yeah, obviously won 5 flags this century and is the only team that has gone back-to-back at least twice in this century, which is crazy because ultimately, yeah, obviously had, yes, Richmond as well, but ultimately, yeah, also had, obviously, Hawthorn's three-peat in the 2010s as well to kind of go over. Obviously, Collingwood, one of those teams that could have possibly gone back-to-back in a few years there. Sydney obviously was another one. West Coast obviously was another one as well in terms of results for them. It's just one of those things that's crazy to me looking back. But this Brisbane team just wanted it a lot more, and I can understand from a mindset that they relatively looked like they definitely wanted it a lot more than Geelong did. Obviously, Geelong were like, oh yeah, we're just going to beat them easy. Bailey Smith obviously getting a bit of a touch-up as well. Fantastic on that. Obviously, he's trying to get the last laugh by obviously getting into Harris Andrews when the game is well and truly gone with 7-8 minutes left of the game and they're down by well over 50. Interesting situation for that, but ultimately Brisbane obviously put their name on the 2025 Premiership Cup. So it's going to be in their trophy cabinet relatively soon, you would think, or at least a replica of it will be in there. So that's a great result for them. Obviously, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to kind of back it up again, but I don't put it past them. I feel like with obviously some of the players that are coming up, obviously I think they're getting Oscar Allen in on trade. I think they're getting Sam Draper on trade as well. Obviously, the trade period is not for another couple of weeks. I think it's not until November at the earliest. Excuse me. So it'll be interesting to see which players end up going. Obviously, they had Jarrett Berry out as well for the grand final. They had somebody injured. Obviously, Lucky Neal come back into the side and looked like it was going to be a really interesting pick. But obviously, I think after those first couple of plays of him running and bouncing the ball at least twice, and then obviously thumping that kick from 50 plus, he knew that his calf was good at that point. Obviously, trained it obviously during the week, but obviously hadn't played a full game for quite a lengthy amount of time. But yeah, once he did those two acts, I feel like he was like, yeah, okay, I'm well on for this game, for the rest of the game. My leg's going to be okay. I thumped a goal, which ended up being 3 in a row for the Lions in the third quarter, or towards the end of the third quarter actually, which kind of didn't exactly blow the game apart at that point in time. I think it was obviously the first goal in the fourth quarter, but it was definitely one of those goals that definitely kind of swung the momentum towards Brisbane, especially during the end of the third quarter and the start of the fourth, with that goal. And I think it kind of inspired a lot of the other players to be like, this guy's been injured for like weeks. Didn't think like he was going to get a chance to play in the grand final. He's playing in the grand final, and he's kicked a goal from outside 50 on a leg that seems like it's fucking busted. Like, that's crazy. So, pretty great story for him. Pretty great story for the Brisbane Lions as well. And you can kind of roll it all the way back to the game against the Giants last year in the final series, in the semi-final, because obviously they won their elimination final relatively well, but obviously being down at the half and especially at three-quarter time against the Giants to come all the way back, I feel like the Giants kind of sparked a fire in them for more glory. So pretty crazy result, obviously for the Giants and for the Lions, I should say. But yes. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the Cubs, because obviously the Cubs are my baseball team. And obviously the stage is set for the postseason now. The last games were actually this morning. Obviously the Cubs ended up sweeping the Cardinals as well, which kind of helped a lot of things in terms of the wild card race. But obviously we won yesterday, so that kind of fixed up the wild card position for them. So ultimately, on the National League side, the Brewers ended up sewing up the number one spot. I think they actually did that yesterday as well, because the Phillies lost. The Phillies are in the second seed, so they've got the divisional series, so they've got the week off. They've got a few days off, and they won't be playing until the divisional series. And then obviously the Dodgers were the third seed. The Cubs are in the fourth seed. They're both hosting home wildcard series games. So I feel like I think it's 2 of the 3 games I think are at home. I'm not sure if it's the best of 3 and they're playing all of them. Obviously in the LA series it'll be LA, and whether it'll be Chicago for all of them. Then obviously the 5th seed was San Diego, so we play against the Padres. And the 6th seed was set up for the Mets to actually get in, because the Reds ended up losing to the Brewers yesterday and today. But the Mets actually ended up getting beaten by the Marlins, so they ended up actually coming in 7th out of the seed. So they actually missed the playoffs on the last game of the regular season. And even a couple of games during the end of the season, the last week of the season as well. So kind of a bad situation for the Mets, because they'd been in there in the postseason race for quite a lot. Had a postseason position for pretty much the majority of the regular season as well. So crazy side on the National League side. Then on the American League side, the number 1 seed goes to the Toronto Blue Jays, and the second seed also goes to Seattle. Goes to the Seattle Mariners for the first time in over 2 decades. I think since 2001, I think it was. Seattle have won their division, and they end up going into the divisional series, so they actually have a few days off as well, which is great for them. And also the Astros, the Houston Astros missed completely for the playoffs. They missed it a couple of days ago, so that's big for them. Obviously, the Astros had missed since 2016, so huge streak that's been broken. Then in terms of the wildcard series, Cleveland are playing at home. They got the number 3 seed, as the Yankees got the number 4 seed. So we'll have games in Cleveland and in New York. So New York will be playing the 5th seed, which obviously is the Boston Red Sox. So a huge series for them. And then the 6th seed went to the Detroit Tigers. So actually, the Cleveland Guardians and the Detroit Tigers rather, not Detroit Lions. That's NFL. They actually only just played each other literally in the last week. Obviously, giving Cleveland the win of the division, because obviously the Tigers ended up losing quite a few games leading in, and they had to play each other. So to play for that position in their division. So yeah, seems like it's set up for a payback for Detroit, but obviously Cleveland could go through and play against Seattle. So the Cubs will be playing the Padres in a best-of-3 series. If they do end up winning, they will be going to a best-of-5 divisional series against the Brewers. So division rivals, if we end up going out of the, if we win the best-of-3 in the wildcard rounds, and then obviously if we make a pass there to the Champions Series, National League Championship Series, it's a best-of-7, and yeah, it could be against Philly, the Dodgers, or the Reds. So who knows, and who knows what's going to happen with the Cubs, but relatively good to get in the position that they did to make playoffs. Would have liked to win the division though, and they were up by a decent margin to win the division, and they haven't done it, which was not great for them. But they still got over 90 wins this season, so that wasn't a bad situation for them. They just really had to work out outside of that All-Star game slump. If they won a few more games, the division would have been a lot closer for the Brewers. And the Brewers probably wouldn't have had to have rested as many players as they did. And obviously some of the games that they end up losing would have been more important for both the Brewers and the Cubs seasons. So we'll see what happens. I think they play starting this week. I think it's starting Tuesday. I think it's the 30th. So it'll be October 1st for me watching. The Cubs should be in action against the Padres at home at Wrigley Field. So see what happens. But with all that said, all those results being talked about, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. I'm sorry if I've ranted a few times over this episode. Episode should be about as long as it normally is. Just obviously with my teams bowing out relatively early in some of the final series and stuff like that. Don't have to talk about them much, if making finals at all. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 1100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care.